Hello, and welcome to Speaking Frankly, where we feature honest talk with thought leaders across the advertising ecosystem and beyond. I am Kim Frank, your host and Geopath president. Today, I am really excited to be joined by Pierre Bouvard. Pierre is the Chief Insights Officer at Cumulus Media, Westwood One. Pierre is a super well-respected leader in the media industry. He's worked across multiple channels throughout his career, including Arbitron and Nielsen and TiVo. Pierre, thank you so much for joining us today.
Kim, thank you. I'm excited to be on as we are in sister and brother mediums, out of home, radio and out of home.
So Pierre, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, your expertise?
Sure. So went to Northwestern and I got into radio right out of school. I was interning at Arbitron while I was, which was the audience measurement company. I used to explain that it was the Nielsen of audio. And then a couple of years back, Nielsen bought them. And so they truly now are the Nielsen of audio. So I worked for them as a trainer and a seller in Chicago and San Francisco, Dallas, and New York. And then I went to go work for a programming consultancy where we did market research to help stations fix their formats, launched hip hop as a new format in the 90s, and then returned to Arbitron to lead sales and marketing and to launch the portable people meter, which is the current currency for audience measurement in radio in the top 50 markets. Went to TiVo finance startup called TRA, which was one of the kind of the pioneers in matching what people watch and what they buy, which was revolutionary 10 years ago, and now everybody's doing it. And then I joined Cumulus Media Westwood One about 5 years ago to lead attribution and data and targeting and insights.
Great, thanks. So, we get a lot of questions about how other channels are measured. Do you mind giving us a little information on how radio is currently measured? How is the currency developed?
Sure. So there's two main approaches in markets outside the top 50 and the several hundred markets. Nielsen uses a personal diary, and it's actually really held up very well over time because it's personal and because people typically only listen to a handful of stations. And they typically spend the majority of their time with the one station they listen to the most. So it's a pretty simple 1 week booklet where you just put time, station, and place, when you started and stopped listening, the name of the radio station. And if you were at home, in car, at work, or some other place. And so that's how markets 50 plus are measured. And then in the top 50 markets, it's the portable people meter. Radio stations and TV networks put an encoder in the rack that inserts an inaudible code in the audio. And the PPM can pick up this hidden code. So all the consumer has to do is wear the meter. And there's a little green light that's attached to a motion detector. And they have to have 8 hours of green light time or motion during the day. And if you get 8 hours of motion, which means you carried it pretty much all day long, you're included in the panel. If you forgot it at home that day, you're dinged, you get less points, and your data is not included. There's a little beacon in the home that knows if you're in home or out of home, and it's automatic. So if it can't hear the beacon, it knows, you're on the road, you're in the car, you're at work or something like that. So those are the two measurement services. Nielsen is using the portable people meter in their TV service as well, because it does a great job of measuring out-of-home TV viewing. The stereotype is guys in bars. It's not. It's people at other people's homes. It's a quality viewing environment. So those are the two approaches.
Interesting. So what kind of differences do you see between the diary measurement and the people meter measurement?
Sure. David Ogilvy once said that people don't say what they think. So what we tend to see with the meter is it picks up a lot more stations. So you might have been in the car with your spouse or your kids, and you maybe didn't say, well, I didn't pick that station, maybe that was not me, but the PPM is picking up everything. So we see twice as many radio stations, in the meter technology. But interestingly, the rankings and the shares, are actually fairly similar. The PPM, the diary does exaggerate time spent a little bit, because you kind of say, I started listening here and I started listening here, when in reality, in a meter, you might have jumped in and out a little bit. The interesting thing about the meter is that it's tuned to audibility. So if you're in the car and you turn the radio down and you're on the phone, it can't hear the code. So what's interesting about PPM, it's actually the most accurate audience measurement service, because what you're paying for in radio is audibility. Like, can people hear my ad? Erwin Efron called it ears on. It's ears on measurement. In TV, people don't always have eyes on. A lot of time they're kind of, looking at this. But in radio, that meter does capture ears on listening.
Fascinating. So I would assume that the radio industry has been impacted by COVID, and some of the, different market behavior, the lockdowns, the opens, the different ways that people are traveling around the country. How has the radio industry been impacted?
So, like many other media, that we saw a significant impact in April and May, where so many Americans were literally at home. But what we saw in the Nielsen data, which was perfectly mirrored by the Geopath data, is that listening and driving started recovering dramatically in May. And, over the summer, listening, was about 80-90% recovered, which is what Geopath showed. And then as we got to the end of the summer, Geopath started showing 20 to 30% increases in miles traveled over the past year, which, by the way, carried through right through the end of the year. So we're right now at around, depending upon the market, 90-ish% of pre-COVID tuning volumes, defined as comparing to March. So it's been a significant recovery. Obviously, we're not totally there. We don't have that last 10 or 15%. Our assumption, back half of 2021, with mass vaccine adoption, we'll grab back those last 10 or 15 points of tuning. But interestingly, the perceptions of listening are very different from the realities. Most advertisers think, well, I'm at home, everyone is at home. But when you actually look at the realities of Geopath, realities of Nielsen, you can see there's a significant recovery that's occurred.
So some of the work that you've been doing that I find really fascinating is your work with Advertiser Perceptions, trying to sync up reality versus the perception of reality. I know we talked a bit a few months ago, and I did some blog work coming out of work that you had done based on the Dallas Fed. I think you have an update on that information.
Yeah. So every month, the Federal Reserve out of Dallas does a national study. And it's a very simple study. They interview folks that were in the job ranks pre-COVID. So it's pre-pandemic workers. And the question is, what are you doing now? Are you commuting to work? Are you commuting some days? Are you working from home? Or are you out of the workforce? So we took, and they've been publishing this data monthly. So we took their actual questions, and then we went to Advertiser Perceptions, who's kind of like the gold standard of what people that make media decisions, either at brands or at agencies, think. And we literally asked them the exact same questions. So as we speak right now, what percent of Americans are commuting to work, every day? So if you look at that data from fall, the marketers, and we have this up on the screen here, the marketers all the way on the left-hand side of your screen perceive that 32% of Americans are commuting every day to work. The reality, as of December, just released from the Fed, is 55%. So that's almost twice as many Americans are commuting daily as advertisers and agencies think. On the flip side, look at the work from home perception, 43%. So agencies and advertisers think, 4 out of 10 American workers are working from home. The reality, it's half of that. It's 19%. And pre-pandemic, there already was about 9 or 8% of Americans that were always working from home. So there is a significant gap between commuting perceptions and the realities, whether it's Geopath or whether it's the Dallas Fed. And, my battle cry on this for all of us in the media business is take the me out of media. We build perceptions of the world based upon what we're doing, and we love to think that we're representative. And so if I'm an agency strategist or a brand, I've been working home, and my assumption is everyone's working from home. The reason why Geopath exists and Nielsen and the Fed is, what are the facts? What's actually happening? What's the reality? And, we're definitely seeing there is quite a disconnect between the perceptions among agencies and advertisers and the realities of hard data.
Are there other disconnects that you think you're seeing that are interesting?
We just released a separate study about overall media use. And so we asked, Advertiser Perceptions asked, how much time do you think Americans spend with TV, linear TV, connected TV, radio, smartphones, social media, et cetera. And the headline is they way underestimate time spent with linear TV. They way overestimate time spent with connected TV, underestimate time spent with radio. I mean, it's almost like existing media are dramatically underrepresented in their perception of time spent, and newer things are overrepresented. Now, some of that is that the job of a media agency and in part a marketer is to look over the horizon at existing trends. When you do that every day, objects appear larger, just like the mirror on your car says. And if you study new trends so much, you kind of think like, oh, they're bigger than they are. And there was a separate study Ipsos did in Canada. They asked very simple questions like, what percent of Canadians are on TikTok? Agencies and advertisers said something like 60, 70%. It's a fourth of that. So, this is, again, take the me out of media, that we as media professionals are not representative of the market. We're actually very, very different.
And I think that's a lot of what's happened when we are all very New York focused, right? Because New York was significantly impacted by COVID, but the rest of the country doesn't have the same experience that we have all had in the metropolitan area in New York.
Yeah, there's a great quote from the CEO of Havas Media, who said, the biggest risk for radio is the 26-year-old media strategist who lives in New York, doesn't own a car, doesn't think anybody else has a car, uses a car, and listens to radio. So yes, we definitely, a Chicago, New York perception of the world, versus reality is definitely, a challenge for everyone concerned.
So what do you think 2021 is going to look like for the radio industry?
So, I mean, on the national level, we're already seeing significant recovery. Interestingly, if you just take a look at the insurance category in network radio, spending was up last year, 2020, 30%. So there are categories, pharma, that are growing, CPG, there's a lot of big national brands that are continuing to advertise. So the national marketplace snapped back pretty quickly. Local is different. Local is retail. It's concerts and restaurants and bars and clubs and, things that people go to. And so that's definitely, we're looking at kind of back half 2021 with mass vaccine adoption to start to see, a return to a lot of those, categories that have unfortunately either have limited service, or are really kind of impinged in terms of their ability to, to take care of customers.
So also looking ahead to the future, what are some of the cool tech innovations that we can expect to see coming out of the radio industry?
That's a great question. So right at the end of December and beginning of January, the Federal Communications Commissions put out for public comment a new technology called zone casting. It's from a company called Geo Broadcast. And as the name implies, it would let over-the-air radio broadcasters the ability to create zones. So if you think of New York, you could have a Long Island zone, a Westchester, Connecticut zone, a Northern New Jersey, 5-borough zone, and that would mean different traffic reports in those zones. It could mean local advertisers who serve those areas. Obviously, out of home has done this so well for years. Local cable has had zones for so many years. So bringing the ability to target geographically within a market through zone casting, I think is really interesting. And a lot of the big agencies, Kathy Doyle at Universal McCann, Lauren Russo at Horizon, Jennifer Hungerbuehler at Cara, are really leading the charge on this and saying, hey, let's test and learn and let's pilot this. So that is definitely something that that's worth watching.
Interesting. How about programmatic radio? Is it a thing? Is it a thing that's coming? What's the status of programmatic buying?
Sure. So programmatic radio is here in the digital realm, meaning audio streaming. Programmatic audio is here. Listening to radio over the internet has been a slow growth, but it continues to grow. So about 5 or 6 years ago, about 5% of total radio listening, AM, FM, was to the stream. We're now about 10%, 13%, depending upon the demographic. So there's more tuning volume going there. Nielsen recently rolled out the ability to kind of combine your over the air and your stream as one number. And they've kind of put a methodology enhancement to kind of do a better job of capturing that. So I think programmatic podcast is also here. While most podcast ads, or a lot of them, are still the host live reads, as the brands pour into podcasting, the ability to, instead of buy shows, target an audience, like in-market auto buyers, is definitely on the rise. Programmatic over the air is probably a little bit further away. However, there is something nearer in that companies like Hudson MX are pioneering for the big agencies, which is process automation. It's not programmatic, but it's taking the very laborious and time-consuming things in the process of buying radio and automating those things. And I got to tell you, that is really going to help our industry, because it'll allow agencies and advertisers to more quickly and more efficiently plan, buy, and post radio.
Just out of curiosity, what are those pain points? So what is slow in the process today that will be sped up through automation?
So let me give you an example. Pre-buy. What inventory is available? At what price? Right now, that's a fairly manual process that involves, a bit of emailing and phone calling, and, there's some stuff that's automated. So providing agencies with the quick ability to say, here is the available inventory, here's the available pricing, that's a pain point, by far, that, folks like Hudson MX are working on. And then on the back end, did things run as ordered? And being able to quickly see occurrence data, and did the ad run as scheduled, and making sure. So that, I think, even though it's not glamorous, it's not sexy, it's significant productivity enhancement for everyone on both sides of the table.
It's really interesting how, similar so many different channels are when we put our pain points out on the table and what we're all trying to solve for.
Yep.
Pierre, this has been wonderful. So speaking frankly, if you could put a message out on all of the out-of-home inventory across the country, what would it say?
I would put it outside agencies and advertisers, and it would say, take the me out of media.
That's awesome. I think we should maybe put that on some t-shirts, Pierre.
I think so. I'm thinking swag.
I love it. Well, thank you so much again for joining me today. This has been really super informative. I love it. If anyone listening has any questions, you can email us at geekout@geopath.org with the subject line, Speaking Frankly Questions. Thanks again, Pierre.
Thanks so much.